Part 2 of Emil H., the Viking Princess. We had made it. Samson and I had saved my father, and were now on our way home. Adrenaline was still pumping through my veins, and my eyes showing a slight hint of gold in them. But I had sown it. I hugged my father so tightly, and I started to explain to him all that had happened. I told him about Samson and the dragon and how we found the island and everything. I was just so happy I had my father back. Then my father turned to Samson, who was trying to talk to Garth, but Garth hadn't said a word the whole time. My father called Samson over and looked into his eyes.
So, I have you to thank for keeping my Emily safe. You have done me and my whole village a great deed, and I am in your debt, good sir.
Samson just smiled and shook my father's hand. Samson asked if he could talk to my father in private. They went below deck to talk. I wondered what they could be talking about. I had no idea, but it frustrated me to no end. Garth came over and sat next to me. I looked over at his dirty, soiled body and realized he couldn't have been much older than Samson. He was tall and had sharp teeth. He stood and took off his shirt, exposing his rock-hard tan chest. I couldn't help but think how hot he was. He smiled at me and dove into the water. I ran over to the side of the ship and watched him swim through the water like a fish in his cut-off shorts. I was thinking about joining him in the water, because it was a hot day and the water looked so nice, but just then my father and Samson came up from below, so I turned and asked what they were talking about. They both smiled at me and said, "We can't tell you that. It's a surprise." I shot them a evil glare, then smiled. I hate surprises, but I guess I have to wait. I laughed and then jumped into the water with Garth, and we swam around and played in the water. After 4 days on the boat, our little Viking town was in sight. Happiness spilled out. I smiled and hugged Samson so tightly. We had made it. We pulled into the harbor and docked Samson's small ship. Martha, a Viking who was an old friend of mine, saw us first and yelled,
"Emily's back and she saved her father! Samson and Emily did it! Question mark!"
Like lightning, the whole village was around us, yelling and asking how we did it. What had happened? It's not like I wasn't happy to see everyone, but all I wanted to do was go back to my house and be with Samson and my father. My father must have said this. He shouted,
"It's been a long week. My daughter and I are going back to our house to rest. We will see you all tomorrow."
The crew made a path and we set off towards our house. I made a small bed out of straw in the corner for Garth to sleep in, before heading to my room where Samson was waiting for me.
And night by night, we will carry out my pledge of vengeance. I will avenge you, Father.
I will avenge you, Father.
I woke up the next morning and rolled out of bed, feeling amazing! Samson was still sleeping, so I tiptoed out of the room to make my father and Samson food. I was looking through the kitchen, but couldn't find anything to make, when Garth came through the front door with 4 orange pheasants, and a small boar hung over his shoulder. "I'm not much of a sleeper, so last night I went out to get some game," Garth said with a grunt, as he dropped the meat on the table. My eyes couldn't leave him. He looked so hot carrying his catch. What a man, I thought. He skinned and feathered the birds and boar, as I went out to my garden and picked some fresh fruities and veggies. Together we made a feast good enough for the goddamn gods. Samson was the first to come out and see what we had prepared. He yawned and smiled with eyes filled with sleep. "Wow, babe, this look as good." I smiled my white teeth and skipped over to my father's door. "Food's ready, father!" I heard him groany and step onto the floor. I glided back over to the table and sat next to Samson. My father burst through his door. "Damn, that smells good." 1. His eyes were filled with life. He sat down and we all started eating, talking, and laughing. It was heartwarming. After we were done, I cleaned up as my father, Samson, and Garth smoked a pipe outside on the front porch. I couldn't have been more happy. Bracket colon. I came outside after I was done with my work and asked Samson if he wanted to walk through the town with me. He held my hand as we started down the kill to the town. Everyone we passed waved and shouted, "Hello and thanks for saving the village from that king dragon!" and other praises towards me. I felt so important. I saw a beautiful red ribbon in a store window and asked Samson if he would get it for me. But before I had time to finish, the shopkeep said, "Oh, Emily, anything for you, my dear," and tied it to my golden hair. I couldn't stop smiling. My life was great, and everyone couldn't stop telling me how great I was. I was living in a dream, and the dream loved me.
Emily H., is that you?
Someone said from behind me. I turned and saw Sam and his right-hand man Eric, who was smoking a cigarette and had an empty beer can in his hand. "Sam?" I questioned. "I haven't seen you since grade school." "You and your family moved to Cornerstone Village years ago. What brings you back here?" He grinned almost angrily. Eric spit out his cigarette, which wasn't even lit, and started to say, "We're here to pawn." "Shut up," Sam said, and knocked the can out of Eric's hand. Sam looked at me with an annoyed look as Eric took out a new cigarette out of his pocket and lit it.
"I heard about the dragon you killed and had to come back to see the little Emily I once knew killed a king dragon,"
Sam said. I smiled and said, yes, I did kill a king black dragon. I couldn't have done it without Samson's help, though. Samson put his arm around me and glared up at Sam. "What are you, a wizard or some shit?" Sam had a dark green earth cloak on and stellar aviators on. "No," Sam replied quickly and turned and walked away, Eric following while eating candy. I looked at Samson sharply.
"Why did you say that, Samson? That wasn't very nice. Samuel was picked on in school a lot, so much his family moved away soon after I heard both his parents were murdered, and they never found out who the killer was. You shouldn't be so mean to him." Samson just spit on the ground and said, "I don't like the way he looks. He's got a bad vibe." Desperate to change the subject, I asked Samson to come to Thomas' house with me. Thomas was an old man, some Tims referred to as the village elder. He played the most beautiful music. We walked around the edge of the village to his house and knocked on the door. He answered the door with a grim old smile and welcomed us in gently. We talked for a while about our adventures together. Then Thomas asked if we would like for him to play a song. He started playing. The music seeped into our bones and seemed to lift me off the ground. Samson looked deeply into my eyes and then got down on one knee. My heart stopped. Out of his pocket he pulled a ring made of golden leaves twisted into a ring, and on top they were holding a breathtaking golden diamond. He took a deep breath and asked me to marry him. Thomas smiled as he was playing his music. I let out a small scream and hugged Samson tightly, saying, "Yes, yes, yes!" Exclamation point. "Yes, I will." Thomas congratulated us before we left and walked back to my house. Samson told me that he was talking about marrying me to my father when we were on the boat the other day. We got home and Garth was balled up in the corner with no pants on, asleep. And my father was reading a book in his chair. From that day on till we got married, it was just a blood of happiness and joy. The whole village was at our wedding. There were flowers and my dress was long-slaved and had a hood with white fox ears on it. There wasn't ever a more mag-cal day in all of history, and that night was even better. Semicolon bracket. It had been a few months of lazy, happy days. All the excitement had died down and life was good. It was almost summer again and the town was having the spring festival. There were cherry blossoms raining down over the town and everyone was drinking and having a good time at the festival. This year they filled the fountain with wine and everyone was dipping their cups into it. Even the kids were allowed a little taste. Samson and I were sitting together telling little kids stories of our adventures when it happened. Martha had been drinking a lot of wine and was at her kissing booth when she stood up and just started walking away with a blank face.
I thought nothing of it at the time, but then more people started doing the same, and more, till the whole town was walking away like zombies.
Even the children. Samson and I stood and followed them. Samson had his hand on his blade. "What's going on?" I whispered to Samson. He replied without taking his eyes off the people. "I don't know, Emily. Dark forces are at work." They all walked into a cave at the base of the mountains. I wondered if alchemy was at play here. We were in the cave now with what seemed to be the whole town when I heard a laugh. Samson and I turned to see Sam and Eric standing up top a rock, laughing and carrying on. They must have been blazed. They didn't even see us walking over to them. "What have you done, Samuel? What's going on?" I yelled. They quit logging and turned to face us. "Emily, Samson, I should have known you two wouldn't be affected by my alchemy." Sam scowled. Eric started pulling what looked like a gun out of his jacket, but Sam put out his arm to stop him. "Not here, Eric," said Sam. Sam then mumbled something under his breaths, and there was a flash of blinding light. By the time Samson and I could see again, Samuel, Eric, and all the people had disappeared. What were we going to do? Question mark.
Damn, that smells good. 1,